Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about what is on my minimalist iPhone. And over the past few years, I have really perfected a strategy for just keeping a simple and intentional number of apps on my phone, as well as organizing them in a way that is practical and allows me to use my phone as a tool without overusing it. So I'm excited to dive into this one, share with you exactly what the apps are that I keep on my phone, as well as how I organize them. But before we get into this, if you're here for the first time, hi, my name is Ashlynne, and I make videos every week on this channel about minimalism and intentional living. So if that sounds interesting to you, be sure to hit that subscribe button below. Let's get this started though by talking about my lock screen, and obviously we have just the simple date and time. And then for the pictures, both on my lock and my home screen, I really enjoy using pictures that I've personally taken. And so both of these pictures were taken on a trip that I went on last year. This was actually taken from the top of the Parthenon, and then my home screen was taken in Corinth, Greece, so it was both on the same trip. And I really love how both of these pictures go together. And then specifically for the home screen, I like looking for pictures that have the focal point, or kind of the most interesting part of the image, being in the bottom half to the bottom third of the picture. Because of the way that I organize my apps, I usually only put my apps on the top 3 rows of my home screen, and then on the second page, the top 2 rows. And so having that focal point in the bottom half makes it look less visually cluttered, which is definitely something that I want to try to achieve, having a more minimal phone. Okay, let's now talk about the apps themselves though, and let's start in the top left-hand corner. And what you'll notice as we go through this is, especially on the first page, I try to group all of my apps together in terms of pairs of 2, mostly by their use. And so with the health and the weather app, these are just general reference apps that I tend to use throughout the day. So for the health app, I mostly use this to track my steps. I do enjoy going for walks pretty regularly, and it's just a helpful basic health barometer. Obviously, I'm going to try to work out above and beyond this, but making sure that I'm at least getting some activity every day is always helpful. And then moving on, we have the weather app. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it is very warm today. This is Celsius for you Americans who might be freaking out right now. 31 degrees is toasty though. And obviously I don't need to explain why the weather app is useful, so let's move on now. I have my messages. I use Apple Messages for pretty much all of my texting needs. And then on this first page, the only app that I actually keep on the home page is Instagram. Personally, it's my preferred social media app for connecting with friends. On top of that, I love posting inspirational content and just little tiny snapshots of my life, ways to simplify, things like that. I'm also a big fan of photography, so I have a really fun time just taking pictures to share with friends and the world at large. So if you want to, definitely be sure to follow me on Instagram. I have been trying to post on there a little bit more frequently lately. But let's move on now though to the second row, and for this one you'll see that the camera and photos app I have right next to each other. For the most part, I do try to think through what is a logical placement for my apps, and so having those 2 together, because I'm often taking pictures and then going back and referencing them, it makes sense to have them there. Definitely 2 very frequently used apps. And then next to those, you'll see another paired grouping of apps. The clock and calendar apps are really helpful for me to be able to organize my schedule, as well as make sure that I'm not missing any deadlines, that I'm waking up on time, things like that. Looking at the clock app, I use almost every single feature in this particular app. I'll use the alarms, not only for waking up in the morning, but oftentimes if I have a meeting during the day or a Zoom call that I need to be on, I'll set an alarm to go off 5 minutes before. And then I don't use the bedtime feature that much, but the timer I use all the time for baking and cooking. It's just a really useful feature to have. So that's mainly how I use the clock app. I don't have a smartwatch or anything like that, so it is something that I rely on pretty heavily. And then for the calendar app, I actually have my Google Calendar, which is what I primarily use, synced up with my Apple Calendar. And at one point I had considered just switching to using the Google Calendar app, but what I discovered is that the Apple Calendar actually tells you what the date is on it, whereas the Google Calendar app doesn't on the front of it. And I subconsciously look at the front of that app all the time to figure out what the date is. So for me, it just made more sense to do this, but I can go on here and look at, okay, I had a call earlier this morning, I have, whatever events that I have to accomplish that day put on there. Moving on to the final row, we have yet another paired grouping of apps. The notes and reminders apps really do go hand in hand for me and help me organize my life. The notes app I use for pretty much anything, and you can look and see I have a lot of different folders to hold things like YouTube video ideas, Instagram post ideas. If I have something that I know that I need to remember and am not near a piece of paper to write it down, or even if I'm just making plans and wanting to brainstorm, I find the Notes app really helpful. So if I'm being honest, the Notes app might actually be the most used app on my phone, maybe apart from messaging, but it still might be the most used. Then we have reminders, and this is just a really helpful one in general. I use it a lot for groceries, as well as if there's something that I need to remember that isn't as urgent at a specific time, I'll do that. So for example, I have a reminder at the beginning of each month to pay our water bill because I can't set that up on auto pay and things like that. And then the final two apps I have on this home screen are the Gmail app, and obviously I use this just for being able to see and respond to emails and more just be aware of them as they come in. I don't actually respond to many emails on the Gmail app, but it is helpful just so I can see emails as they're coming in, and so I can be aware of if there are any important emails that I need to respond to the next time I'm at my laptop. And then the final app we have on here is the Skillshare app, and I've talked about Skillshare before. They've sponsored some of my videos, but it is an app that I use pretty frequently just to be able to learn about things that I'm interested in. This video isn't sponsored by them. I have worked with them in the past, but it's also just an app I use regularly, so I keep it on my phone. And then before we move on to the second page on this bottom row, I just keep the Apple Maps app, which I know a lot of people don't really love the Apple Maps app, but I personally love using it to be able to find local food recommendations, and I really don't mind the way that it operates when you're driving too. Christopher is a massive Waze user, and I know a lot of people prefer Google Maps, but for me, I really enjoy just the simplicity of Apple Maps. And then down here as well, we just have the regular phone app, Safari, pretty standard, and then I have the Apple Music app, which I don't actually use for listening to music, but I have the Harry Potter audiobooks on here, which I tend to listen to at least once a year, and so I just keep it down there. I might be able to move something else to that spot, but honestly, at this point, I'm just so used to it being there that I've never really felt the need to move it. But that's everything I keep on the front page. Let's move on now to the second page, and I do try to keep just all of my apps on these two pages, and like I mentioned before, 3 lines on the first one, and I aim for 2 lines on the second one as well. So let's just start at the top again and move across. We have the virtual wallet app, which is just my banking app, so I can use it to check my balance, transfer funds, things like that. Next up we have the calculator, and I have never been great at mental math, and so I use this all the time to calculate literally everything in my life. The FaceTime app, once again, I use it pretty frequently, and I use it to stay in touch with people. And then moving on, we have a utilities folder, and this is where I tend to keep those apps that either I don't use frequently or can't delete and serve more of a utilitarian type of purpose. I don't necessarily have fun with these apps or enjoy using them, but some of them you need. So the wallet, Find My iPhone, App Store, settings, and contacts, I don't believe that you can delete any of those. And then the voice memos app I do actually use. I use it to record the audio for a lot of my videos, and so that one's actually helpful. And then obviously the App Store I do use. Because I keep a more minimal iPhone, do pretty regularly download and then delete apps. Moving on to the bottom row though, we have 4 different folders here: miscellaneous, media, social, and photo and video. So let's start with miscellaneous, and this is, as the name would suggest, just a combination of different apps that I like to reference. So Amazon, Target, and Etsy, you can immediately see are more shopping types of apps. Etsy, because I love being able to really just see the work of local creators, and I do enjoy investing in that. Brands like Lynn & Fox also, who I love their stuff, also sell through Etsy, and so it's just a helpful app for me to have. Amazon is also helpful just because it can be nice to be able to leverage some of their shorter time frame shipping, as well as if we need electronics or things like that, we'll often buy those through Amazon. And then same thing goes for Target. I'll sometimes place an order through the app for pickup in store, or just try to see if items they have are in stock. We use that store to buy a lot of our groceries and just general basic items that we need, and so it can be helpful just to have the app for reference if needed. And then we also have the ESPN app on here, and I really enjoy sports, specifically football, which if you're a regular watcher of my channel, you might not know that, but Surprise, I actually love football. And Venmo, of course, I use for being able to send payments to friends, especially just paying them back for meals if I don't have my wallet on me. Moving on, we have the media folder. The first app you'll see is the Read Scripture app, and I have been trying to read through the Bible in a year. And so I am in Proverbs currently, and it really just easily outlines exactly what my scheduled reading is for the day. We have the Kindle app, which I'll use for reading books, Spotify for listening to music, and then of course Audible for audiobooks, and podcasts for exactly what the name would suggest. This is what I meant though earlier about being an NFL fan. You can look at my podcast subscriptions and definitely tell that I like some football. But that's the media folder, and then over here we have the social folder, and I have a lot of social media apps, and the reason for that is that my job is actually working in social media, yes, with YouTube, and so I have the YouTube and YouTube Studio apps, but also my digital marketing job is very heavily focused on social media, so Facebook, Facebook Messenger, Pinterest, WhatsApp, those are all apps that I use for communicating with my job. And I don't need to go into these in too much depth, but quickly, YouTube obviously I use for watching and posting videos. YouTube Studio is really helpful for being able to respond to people's comments, and there's also sections in there where you can look at your analytics, how many people are watching videos, how long they're watching for, things like that. Pinterest I really love using personally as just a visual reference, if you will. So I'll have a lot of different boards about kind of house things and projects I want to make, and I find a lot of recipes through Pinterest. Facebook and Messenger I use mostly for work, but personally I do use Facebook groups and Facebook Marketplace somewhat, and then GroupMe I use just for general communication with jobs, with friend groups, with people from our church, and then finally WhatsApp I basically just use for my job and nothing else, but gotta have it. And then for the final three apps, the photo and video folder just has some fun ones for me. I mentioned earlier how much I love being able to post to Instagram and have kind of photography as a creative expression, and these are three apps that really help me to be able to do that. First off, I use the Lightroom app to be able to edit photos, so you can change things like the exposure, contrast, highlights, colors, everything like that. Because I do a lot of photography, not only for fun, but also some freelancing photography work as well. It's really useful to have a bit more of an in-depth app that I can use to fine-tune images exactly how I want them to. So I use that for editing my pictures, and then the preview app I'll use for being able to see what they'll look like in my feed before they actually go live. And then finally, we have the Story Art app, and this is a really fun and useful app for being able to put together creative stories. So I really love this classic format, and it just allows you to make these really simple collages of photos that can be really helpful in telling a story or encapsulating a memory. So a couple examples of this just quickly is on Instagram, the highlights I have. I love doing this especially when I travel. Christopher and I went on a trip to Chicago last year. I wanted to be able to remember it, so I was able to use the Story Art app just to put together a really cool visual highlight reminder of the trip. I'm not much of one to print out photo books to remind me of different trips, and so something like this can be just a really helpful way of kind of putting together and packaging up a memory in a way that is beautiful and memorable. So that's what I keep on my iPhone and all the apps, but the final couple pieces that I did not mention yet, this is an iPhone 8, and it is getting a bit older and slowing down a bit, so at some point we might need to replace it, but this is the iPhone 8. I believe it is 64 gigabytes, so it's nothing massive, but fits my needs. And then the case I have on here is just a plain black Spigen case, which opens up to reveal my credit card, as well as I keep my ID in here, which is really handy and means that I don't need to carry a wallet with me wherever I go. I can just have my phone on me and have everything that I need. So there you have it. That is what is on my minimalist iPhone, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video and got a little bit of a better glimpse at what I keep on my phone, why I keep it on my phone, as well as how I organize the apps that I have. I hope that maybe this inspires you to be able to go and simplify your digital space. I know that I can often talk about physical clutter and making sure that we're intentional with that, but I think it's important that we apply the exact same logic and principles to our phones as well. They are meant to be tools, and as such, we should use them intentionally. That's it for today's video though. Like I mentioned before, if you're here for the first time and haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button below for more minimalism and intentional living content coming at you twice a week. As well as, like I mentioned during this video, if you want to follow me for more inspiration for simple and intentional living, decluttering. You can follow me on Instagram and Pinterest. I'll have my information linked up for you in the description box below if you're interested, of course. Thanks so much for watching though. I love you all so much, and I will see you in the next one.